when I was starting this, I committed to something that I couldn't understand, but I knew was right. And it just changed the course of my life. And even though I still don't really understand it, I have to continue to commit to it, because otherwise I would have just wasted a really long time. I would have wasted a lot of time. If I stopped paying attention to this thing that to me feels so undeniable and so obvious, which is just the feeling of when good work is being created. If I stopped paying attention to that, I would have wasted all of my life.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Odessa Young is an actor. She sat down with me on the Upper West Side of Manhattan to talk about the work.
Do you have a typical way that you like to begin your preparation process when you get a new role? Like, is there a typical first step that you take to kind of wrap your arms around this new person that you suddenly have to play?
I do, and it is different. And I know that that is something that you hear on the podcast all the time, is that, every role requires a different entry point. There are some roles that are not so natural, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. There are some that are really natural that I feel like I already have all of the tools for, that I understand implicitly, that I have no worry in the world, that I can access whatever I got to access. And then there are some parts that are just a little bit more amorphous. Usually those parts are, this might sound a little disparaging, but it is just the way that scripts work. It's like usually the parts I find really challenging are the peripheral characters. Mm-hmm. It's like often, the leads, the primary characters, the protagonists and antagonists are written in great detail, right, and their arc is laid out for them. And when you read it, it just lands in your body intuitively. And then there's the peripheral characters who provide services to the scenes. And it's your job to figure out who they are as human beings, not just as archetypes. And those ones are pretty challenging. And I think that the process starts for me with trying to, if it doesn't happen naturally, which it often does, trying to become obsessed with the project, with the character, with the world, with the time period, with the costumes, with the hair and makeup, with the, all of these ideas, all of the circumstances around this character, I have to become obsessed with it. Mm-hmm. I mean, Pinterest boards. I mean, journaling. I mean, all of that kind of material collection, just cultivating an obsession. Yeah. And that might be months. I might not do script work. I don't like to do script work until quite shortly before shooting. Mm-hmm. Because things get stale and you start to question your intuition. But for maybe months before the project, it will just be collecting. Yeah. And responding to things and creating synchronicity in your mind and creating the webs.
And wait. Let me ask you this. Do you actually say no to things because you realize you're not going to be able to become obsessed about this?
Totally.
Really? Even though you think you may be able to do it, but you won't be obsessed.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Because it's not worth it to me if I'm not. To the, chagrin of my agents, I am really disinterested in making money. It's nice and I want to be able to be stable, but it's not enough to keep me involved in something or engaged in something. And if I can be that one special person who's figured out how to live their life without making money, I will try my very goddamn hardest. but that is the only thing that keeps me engaged, is that obsession. And it dwindles.
I'm sure.
You cannot stay obsessed. You cannot stay in that state from when you get the part to when you finish the job.
That's why you have to be obsessed, because by the time this job starts, you have to have a little bit of obsession still.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So it has to be a massive amount.
Yeah, it is so hard to sustain.
Yeah, I
So
get it.
you just have to create as much as you possibly can, so that as it inevitably runs out, you can still find things to fall in love with.
You're not just talking about something fun to do or to keep you interested. This is something you need to do in order to do the work. So what is that obsession doing for you in order to help make your job easier? You know what I mean? Can you analyze it that way?
I think it's probably like when people with ADD take Adderall, it's like that's the obsession, just keeps giving you dopamine hits. And it just means that you can get into your work with more confidence.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have that obsession, obviously, and you know this, and this is what you and I are overthinkers, right? So we receive a piece of information about a character, and then we fucking freak out because you're like, okay, but maybe that means this, or maybe they would express it this way, or this way, or this way, or this way, and there's too many variables.
Yeah.
But when you have that weird little chemical thing going on, I think your intuition is more engaged. You feel right more often. Like a feeling hits and it makes sense to you, and so you go down that path. And it's a clarifying experience.
Yes.
It's a clarifying feeling. And I do think that when I'm not obsessed with things, because obviously it's not perfect all the time, and you know some jobs aren't what you think they're going to be, and I run out of that obsession quickly, that's when shit gets a little scary, because I feel unmoored, and I don't feel direct, and I don't feel focused.
Yeah.
But the obsession keeps the focus.
I get it. So in this very room 5 years ago, two people were talking about you.
Who?
Sam and Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
In such glowing terms
Oh, really?
about what you had to do in A Million Little Pieces. And this is interesting to talk about this now, because you didn't, correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't have time to become obsessed with that role.
I didn't, but somehow I did.
Tell me what that means.
Well, I think that that's the thing. When the realities of the industry start coming in, you might get a few days to prepare for a role, like I had with that film. By the way, love them. They're
Wonderful
fucking
people,
incredible.
right?
Wonderful people.
Yeah.
Extremely talented, extremely loving. Do it for all the reasons that I am also drawn to do it.
Yeah.
They're just fantastic. But when you don't have a lot of time, it's the only thing that I have found reliable in terms of process. Like, I didn't train. I don't have like a I didn't train with any, university or coach specifically for. I've done workshops. I've dropped in classes, but I haven't had like a linear training. So I don't have those tools. I don't have like a method to rely on. And I think those things take time, and they kind of exist in perfect, ideal environments, and it's really hard to access those environments all the time. And I find that thing that we were talking about, the obsession, is the only reliable way I have found to be able to get the things out of myself and out of the job with in less than ideal situations.
Right.
Like that film, another actress had dropped out. I came on probably a week before.
Incredible.
And I had read the script a while before, right? And I'd done an audition for it. So it wasn't completely new material. And I think, you know, when you read the script and you work on a scene, like you already start to kind of think about that, cultivating that obsession anyway. And I had a meeting, I went to their house and I had a meeting with them a few days before we were shooting, and it was just like everybody knew what it had to be and what we had to do, and it was go, 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 but never in a way that felt lacking in attention and lacking in care. It was really, really difficult to do, and they did that really well. They never made me feel like I couldn't demand the time that I needed, even though I didn't have that much time. They would have given me everything, but that it helped to be able to have that one thing to rely on. And I probably couldn't have articulated it then, but it was working in me then.
What do you do? I mean, I guess I want to know, like, how important is that kind of support for somebody like you who is coming in with what you need? Do you know what I mean? Is it really even that important? Like, can you operate without support because you do what you need to do yourself?
It's so interesting that you ask this, because I think at one point in my life I would have said, totally, don't need any support. I can just go in and do what I do, and if someone likes it, they like it, and if they don't, they don't. Whatever. But I realized recently that I was taking for granted how generous filmmakers can be with actors as a kind of baseline. And I worked with a filmmaker who I don't think had the same kind of respect or reverence for acting and for my needs that I had been used to. I'm obviously trying to choose my words very carefully. And it really shocked me. And I realized that I had been taking for granted that given.
Yeah.
Because when I didn't have that support, I flailed. And I didn't even know that I'd been getting that support.
Interesting, right?
Yeah. I used to think that what I was doing existed in a vacuum. Not a vacuum, but like I used to think that I didn't come to my performance in any kind of response to the director. And now I really have experienced that I definitely do. And it is a very, very important relationship, obviously. But for reasons that I now know way more internally than I ever did.
Interesting. And tell me a little bit more about now, after that realization, because of the way you work, what does the ideal relationship look like?
I don't know what it looks like. I think it feels fun. Feels fun. And because I think that kind of sense of fun comes when you're both buzzing.
Yeah.
And you're buzzing because you're seeing your work be funneled through someone.
Yeah.
And given back to you in a way that just feels like it's what you want to see.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
and that's the most exciting part. It's when these like weird little tessellating shapes come together, and all of a sudden, it's the picture of it.
Yes.
And I think that's with the directors that I have worked with that I have had really life-changing experiences with. There's a few of them that I can think of at the top of my head who will be forever meaningful and in my life, and just, you know, changed the course of my career and changed the way that I worked. It is that weird mirror thing where you translate something they've given you and then they are translating what you're giving them. And then it's coming out in this thing that just keeps getting more and more authentic as it goes between you. Sorry if that's like a little esoteric, but that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
A film set can be sometimes the most unfun place because of time.
I know.
Because of time and pressure and
know.
all these pressures. And mainly time pressure.
Yeah.
Right? And having to make the day and everything. You know? So I mean, it's such a trap, right? You could spend a year having fun together with people, thinking about this, and then you get there and it's all this pressure and no fun.
Yeah,
How do you there has to be a way to keep that going somehow, even if it doesn't feel like it, or you have to cultivate that, because what you're saying makes so much sense. Even if people can't pinpoint it, even if actors can't pinpoint it as something that they need, I think it is so important to the creative process.
Yeah, I mean, it's all play.
It's all play.
That's all we're doing.
And if you can't cultivate a play environment, it might be good because you have good people and you might get good things. But, and if you don't, then the editor might do really good work to make that happen.
To make it look like you're all having fun.
Right. But it's not, I think it's great if the fun happens and then everything else is also great and you can make it even better, right?
Yeah, it
How
really
do you do
is.
that though?
It's alchemy. It's like you cannot plan for it. It's something that happens or it doesn't. And the more you can set up the environment with the people you choose to work with,
Yes.
I don't care about rushing through, you know what I mean? Like I actually don't mind those pressures on set. Like maybe it's because I've been doing it for I don't have any weird kind of like expectations about set. Like I know what it is.
Yeah.
I know it's just it's a method by which to get footage.
Yeah.
Like that's all it is.
Yeah.
And I think it's about how much you as an actor choose to take things on. There have been some projects where if I can tell that the people are good, that the energy is good, that everybody's kind of magically aligned. It happens rarely, but it does happen. It's fucking cool. If I can tell that that is the circumstance, I can put 100% in. And I don't mean into action and cut. I mean into the experience of making this film. If I can tell that those things are not aligned, if I can tell that there is not a common purpose that is lassoing everyone into the same kind of mind state and belief and promise, then I will not put 100% of myself into making the thing. Again, I don't mean in between action and cut.
I know what you mean.
I don't have a choice about how much I put of myself into action and cut. It's just going to happen.
Right.
But I mean how much I take on personally, how much I can engage and participate with the environment. If I know that if I can sense that it's going to be conflictuous and draining, and if I will not have kindredness with the creators, I just have to protect myself from that.
Yeah.
And that usually, in those environments, it usually means I might have more fun because I don't fucking give a shit.
Right.
And it doesn't cost me anything. And I can find that one person or there's two people in the production who I am kindred with.
Yeah.
And I can just make that my world.
Yeah.
That's where I get my energy.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not ideal, but sometimes it has to happen that way. And then the things that are so miraculous are the things that you constantly feel like your battery is getting charged.
Yes.
Like that's, and it can be from everywhere. It can be from every single person involved in making this thing. It all feels generative.
And how many times has that happened?
3.
A handful of times.
Yeah.
What was it? Was it a top-down thing?
That's important.
Was it that? Was it just by chance? Do you know what I mean? Because what you're saying here is scary, actually. It's scaring the fuck out of me because...
It scares the fuck out of me too.
Because you're articulating something that I believe everybody has a similar experience, but they're not able to articulate it. And in varying degrees. And so we as filmmakers would want to do this. And I'm not saying, you may say, like, it's not a formula. If you think it's a formula and you think you can create it, you're dumb, buddy. I mean, it's not going to happen. It has to either happen or it doesn't. Like, it could be that. But I want to believe that it actually is something that you can actually consciously try to create.
I will qualify this as well, by the way, because I think that those 3 productions that I was talking about, it was my best work, and it was my best production. Like, they were my best productions. They're my best experiences. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you that one person at least on each set, it was their worst.
Wow.
It's not a unanimous feeling.
Okay.
And
that's interesting.
But it is, I think, more. I think it is. You can see how it skews.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
It's more likely to be appreciated by more people if that feeling is there.
Yes.
But it will always be someone's worst experience.
Yeah. And can you, we're getting into the weeds here, but can you, can you tell me what that person is like and why they didn't? Like, are they just not receptive?
Yeah, maybe.
To
And I've been that person.
Goodness.
You know what I mean? Yeah, maybe. But it's someone's not speaking your language.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Like, they will find the thing. And again, I said, I've felt this. Like, I've looked around productions and thought to myself, everybody's having a great time. Everybody's loving this. And all I can see are the problems.
Yeah.
All I can see are the ways in which this is not what I want.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, everything's great. Everything's valid. Everything's inspiration. That's totally fine. Mm-hmm. I would never judge someone for not feeling like they are engaging with the same kind of like joy as I am on a production. And quite often it's because actors are usually treated really well and crew members can be treated like shit. Mm-hmm. So obviously there's going to be a massive disparity in those experiences. But I think it is just, I don't know, it's like kind of spiritual, man. It's like whatever you want to see, you see. If you're in the right place to see it, you will see it. Mm-hmm. And there's something about those jobs, and it is, you're right, it's top down to some extent. Obviously the director is so crucial, and they do set the tone, and they do make the rules by which people interact. But I've also seen that feeling that I'm talking about be cultivated not because of the director, perhaps in spite of the director. Where it can be really special, but it's not necessarily because of the leadership. It can just be special. It's not as cool.
Yeah.
but it can still happen.
Yeah. you don't panic when you realize it's not going to be fun.
No, but it pisses me off.
And
It pisses me off.
Does it actually affect, and you're saying it does affect the work. I mean, so
Yeah.
has there ever been a time when it actually, because you need to survive and you need to adjust, that it actually, you found a way to make it work for you though?
Yeah, it always ends up being a motivating force in some way.
Yeah.
I remember, like, and even if it's not acting, like, the unhappiest I ever was on set, I wrote a full screenplay just in between setups. So it was generative in some ways because I was desperate for something else, right? Like I needed to just take myself out of the environment and put myself in a different one.
Yeah.
And do you know the acting teacher, Larry Moss?
Yeah, of course.
I did a workshop with him, and he always had this part of his book, which I didn't really understand. I still kind of don't, because I used it as a fallback many, many times. And what he says in his book is that doesn't count. You shouldn't do that. And that is, if you're pissed off about the production, you shouldn't use that in the performance. And that's kind of like, that's hard for me to wrap my head around because it's the only thing I can seem to do in those situations.
Right.
And it's not in every take, it's not in every take, it's not in every scene, but I can't ignore the fact that, like, sometimes I see that the producer's like talking in someone's ear about something that doesn't fucking matter.
Right.
And it pisses me off.
Right. And that energy is so huge.
It's so huge.
You have to.
And it's so hard to ignore. And maybe this is maybe I think this because I'm not trained, but I don't think it should be ignored. I don't think it would be happening if it should be ignored. I think that's why I could never really wrap my head around what Larry Moss was trying to say, because I want to go back and read it. I'm only remembering this now, and I want to like actually try to figure out what he was trying to say, because it's a huge part of it for me. Is I do believe that there is this alchemical process that happens where there is a feeling on set that marries itself with the text, with the project, with the story, and it creates the thing that comes through the screen. And none of that should be ignored.
Yes.
And that's why I find it hard, for example, sometimes to work with directors who shoot to edit. Because I find that to shoot to edit requires an ignorance that I cannot do. And I don't think that, whatever, that's great. Like I want to figure out how to do it, but it's challenging for me because it's not why I like films.
What you're talking about there is like this idea of acceptance for the work. It's not just like for survival of you as a person there in this job, right? Just like everybody has a job in a certain situation that changes, and then suddenly they're in an environment they don't like and they have to accept it to survive. You're talking about like, this is your work. Your instrument is you're using it with your instrument, to sound pretentious.
No, it's not.
I mean,
it is, and I could give it up tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, if I wanted more like a consistent way of making money and surviving, I wouldn't do this. That's not right. It's like the opposite of what it's really dumb. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Like, sorry, I interrupted you. No, carry on.
But I want to know if this is right. It's the acceptance is part of the work, is what you're saying. Yeah. Like acceptance of the environment, and like so the Moss thing is confusing to you because it's not accepting in a way, meaning like he's actually saying you need to reject something and not use it.
Yeah, I mean,
in a
that's
way.
my interpretation in my memory right now. I'm sure he was saying something far more like actionable and complex than that, but
Yeah.
I always interpreted it as that.
Yeah.
As like, how can you not use it?
Right.
But then this is the other thing that I get myself into these never-ending spirals of arguments in my mind about, I like a Brechtian philosophy of filmmaking. I don't give a shit about continuity. I don't give a shit about getting a boom in the shot. It doesn't distract me. I always know that I'm watching a film when I'm watching a film. I don't think that detracts from my immersion in it. And so I don't need the trickery of trying not to put your feelings that you're having on set into the product.
Yes.
Why not just admit, I mean, it's all real.
Right.
It's all part of it. It's all in the film. It's all happening anyway.
Right. You may be hitting on why, a lot of things suck. Because, according to me, because we're no longer connecting to the environment. Like literally.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like if we did this more, I think we would have better product.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
I think that it's not a new thing by any means, but it's that kind of like when you start to see actors acting like actors instead of like people, like it can get really... I think, not to get too galaxy brained about it, but it's like AI.
Yes.
Like AI is just eating itself. And I think that there is a way of making films that is just eating itself.
Yes.
And that's great. Good for you. I don't care, frankly. It doesn't give me anything. It's not aspirational.
Right. And I think us not being as freaked out as we should be about AI is a sign of how bad things are.
You know what? Yeah, I agree.
You know what I mean?
Like, well, okay, here's my real fucking answer about that.
Yeah.
And this goes back to like what we're talking about in terms of the difference between the way that some people work on film. With AI, at least something's fucking happening. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like it's not...
I know what you mean.
Like,
I know what you mean.
It's cool because it's terrifying, but like maybe it will actually generate enough energy in people to do something else.
Right.
That's fucking cool. Like I hope that I'm not unwise in hoping that might happen.
Yes, you might be.
I might be. Probably won't be around for the real shit.
Right. I certainly won't be, and that makes me very happy. If I was your age right now, well, let's not get into that, but I'd be scared. But speaking of Brechtianness, when my first film came around, like, so you had seen Zia doing my first film presentation, we'll call it, right?
Yeah.
Is that the way to say it?
Yeah, I guess so. Performance, presentation, keynote speech.
Yeah. And so this was way before there was any talk of a film actually being made of this, or certainly not you being involved with it. So when she did come to you, I'm assuming you had a lot of time with her then to prepare for this, and that was probably ideal for you, right?
Yeah.
But have you ever had time like this with somebody that you're going to be playing?
No, that was entirely unprecedented. And I don't even think, like the real people that I've played, I don't even think if I'd had the opportunity to have that kind of time, I would have wanted it. Because there was something about the nature of that film that I had to make the choice to just go all in.
Yeah.
But it's because if it was a regular film, whatever that means,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have needed that. I wouldn't have wanted it.
I see.
It would have been too much pressure. It would have been too limiting.
Yes.
It would have been too, I just make a documentary if that's what you want.
Right.
I believe that translation is the art form of cinema anyway. So it wouldn't have been a translation. It would have been a literal interpretation. But with this, because it followed almost none of the rules of any film that I'd made before, and because it was kind of also a doc, and it was kind of also a performance and a presentation and also a film, I knew that the process was more important than the result. So I wasn't worried about whether the process would mar the result with those kinds of limitations or with those kinds of like perfections.
Yes.
And I wanted to just experiment with it.
And so that's interesting, because you can have that thought all you want, but there is something has to be done, though. You know what I mean? Like, isn't it kind of scary to be investing in experimentation like this, knowing that there still is a product that actually comes out and it's a film and it's an actual film?
Yes. I think that that's also probably part of how I've learned to feel safe making films, is because I find it almost impossible to think about the film as it will be watched. So I never I never worried about something being misinterpreted, because I'm not even thinking about it being interpreted. But yes, but nevertheless, there is still that thing where it's like, look, my job is to keep people's attention.
That's it. That's
you know?
a better way to say it. Yeah.
And
that's your job.
People don't just want, if it was really truly just a film about process, it would have been like me moaning on the floor for 2 hours. Which is that's something that really happened when we were doing this, when we were preparing for this film. I did these really like 2 weeks of rehearsals with Zia and the movement director for the film, whose name is Monica Mirabile. I always mispronounce her last name, but I think that's it. And it was a lot of like rolling around on the floor and moaning and just like embodying. And they're performance artists. I did performance art boot camp, but that part of the process is not going to hold people's attention.
Right.
So there is an understanding that I need to rely on my inherent knowledge of acting and
storytelling skills,
storytelling. And that, I think, also is where the fun comes in, because I find doing scenes, I find performing scenes fun. And I was working with like Phil Ettinger, for example, who is now one of my dearest friends since making this, and just an actor that I find truly so inspiring, because he embodies all of the things that we're talking about. All he cares about is the feeling of what it is in the moment, on the day, just the ultimate truth. But it's like doing scenes with someone like him is fucking fun, even if it's nasty, even if it's like makes your skin crawl. And there were scenes that we had to do that made our skin crawl. Like, even if it feels like shit, it's still fun. And that, I think, is like the key to still making entertaining work without necessarily like creating the arc in your mind for yourself and having too much of a hand in the character's experience.
Right. And isn't that really the director's job anyway? You know what I mean? Like, shouldn't you just dump it all out and let them figure it out?
100%. I mean, that's the thing. Like another kind of like argument spiral that I have in my own head is like, how much should an actor play for camera?
Yes. I've been thinking about this lately a lot too.
Sometimes sometimes I realize that I almost don't have a choice. It's just something that's been ingrained in me. I know when there's a camera there, I'm on. I'm going to do it. I'm going to fucking play for the camera. And then so much of my work lately has been trying to pull away from that.
Interesting.
Trying to recognize that when it's happening and wonder why it's happening and wonder what it would feel like if it wasn't happening. And just letting the camera capture what it is. I mean, sometimes the hardest thing to hear when you're in a scene is like, can you open up a bit more? And it's like, okay, so just like, you know what I mean? Open up being like, can you let the camera see you more? And I have to say that like the performances that I have, okay, there's this fantastic moment in it happens a few times in Dog Day Afternoon, where Pacino is so overwhelmed by whatever is happening that he breaks, he cries, he has an emotional moment, and he turns away from the camera. He hides himself from the camera. And it's so powerful and beautiful. And can you imagine what that would have been like if Sidney Lumet had said, like, can you just like open up a little more? Do you know what I mean? Like, it would have ruined it.
Yes.
The like, and that's the alchemy. Like, the camera sees what it sees.
Right.
And part of me thinks like that's also not an actor's job. I know that this is like wildly unorthodox.
Yeah, no, but that's
like,
interesting.
For some things, it's an interesting thing to experiment with, you know?
Sometimes I'm watching things now and I can't believe how this is shot so wrong. And like, and it's like we're seeing too much. I've been thinking that lately.
Well, it's like the decline in media literacy has something to do with this as well, where like it's hard for an audience to separate what they are seeing in a fictitious film from perhaps a director or writer's belief or personality. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, I think that people see art now as an expression of identity, and that's the only thing that it can be good for, I think, in a lot of people's minds. And that means that art and film can't be interpreted as experimental or as just an idea or as an exploration of a concept or an environment or something. And I think that that's why now we're seeing too much, is because if there's any question about the intention behind something, the motivation behind something, it calls into question the integrity of the work.
Yes.
According to people who think of art as only being valuable as an expression of identity.
Yes.
It just like removes all the monsters from the corners.
Yeah.
It shines a big floodlight into a situation, and that makes people feel a lot more comfortable being able to interpret it, because they receive all of the information. They don't have to discern the information from symbols, and it's less interpretive, less dangerous.
I hope you take this the right way. Listening to you talk, I'm embarrassed and ashamed of what the world has to offer you as an artist right now. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? And I'm not,
that's like, thank you. That's very nice of you to say.
So how does somebody like you, who has these thoughts, who is into intuition, experimentation, navigate this business? Like you're saying before, like your team, to their chagrin, they're not interested in money. I mean, I want to believe that the future holds for you, like that people can get their act together and be able to rise to you. I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass.
No, I mean
this in this way, like, because I want to see it. You've had a run at it that is pretty good already. You know what I mean? So, and you're
very
young.
Lucky.
Yeah. So, but how do you we're not just talking about AI, we're talking about
Sure.
we're talking about the dumbing down of
Yeah.
of us that's happening.
Yeah.
And this work. So what does somebody like you do to kind of combat this, or to kind of separate the stuff that's going to make you rise up? Or how do you make sure that gets to you?
I don't know. I don't know. I think part of it is when I was starting this, I committed to something that I couldn't understand, but I knew was right. And it just changed the course of my life. And even though I still don't really understand it, I have to continue to commit to it, because otherwise I would have just wasted a really long time. I would have wasted a lot of time. If I stopped paying attention to this thing that to me feels so undeniable and so obvious, which is just the feeling of when good work is being created. If I stopped paying attention to that, I would have wasted all of my life. So at this point, it's a matter of pride. That's the only thing I can do, is I keep looking for that. It is sometimes deeply disheartening how few and far between the experiences are of making those kindred connections. I could do more to make them. I know I could. I am not the most open person. I am not the most I'm not the most social person. I could be reaching out way harder to find a community of people who can do this, who I can service with this. And that's also really hard. That's like part of the stage fright, part of the anxiety. It's like, do I belong in this seat? Do I belong in this theater? Do I belong in this industry? It's constant questioning about, whether or not you're crazy, basically. Every time it works so well that it forgives everything.
I know what you mean.
And that's the only thing I can rely on. The bad experiences that I've had that have made me want to quit acting every year. Like I have, most of the time when a job finishes, I want to quit acting.
I'm laughing because I know what you mean.
Unfortunately, I think doing this work is kind of like childbirth, where you just forget the pain so that you can do it again. Yeah. It's like the chemicals are released and you're just amnesic about the pain that it caused you.
Yeah.
Every time I finish a job and I want to quit, somehow, call it God, call it just the laws of the universe, whatever the fuck you want, somehow an opportunity arises that makes me forgive it all. You gotta listen.
I pray it continues.
Me too. Me too. But here's the thing, if it doesn't, if one day I wake up and I am really done with it, and that's great, and it's not giving me what it needs to anymore, what I need from it anymore, that's gonna be great too.
Yes.
I just don't think that will happen. I don't think I will ever get nothing from it. I do have the hope that there remains in the core of this industry, it's Greek origins.
Yeah.
Of devotion.
Yes.
Acting was a devotional sport.
Yeah. Odessa Young, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.